And today I'm here with a special guest. Zach Boll is a senior product manager at Lowe's, and today we're going to be asking him questions about product management in e-commerce. Thank you for being with us today, Zach.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm so pumped for this. I'm excited.
Thank you. And today we're talking about all about e-commerce and product management. How things are done in product management with e-commerce. So I'd like to start first by asking you, how did you get into product management?
Yeah, so I have been I've been in e-commerce my entire career. And so if you ask me how did I get into product management, I always say like I've always been in product management. My title just took a little bit to get there. So when I started in e-commerce, I was actually a designer. On e-commerce, I created email and websites, but I hated moving pixels and I hated being asked to move pixels. So I got more and more into the data and the why. And so I started to learn coding so that I can actually run some A/B tests so that I can argue it and make my point a little bit better. And so when I started getting into development, I loved it a little bit more. I was building, I could see people interact with it, but then I also wanted to know the things I was building had a big impact on the business. And so I started getting into more of the business side of it and learning about marketing and how it affects everything. And then I ended up being into a role that's called e-commerce manager. And eventually that kind of spun and I found product management. And I basically said, I'm doing this job now. I'm doing exactly what they're doing. And talked to my boss and we just moved my title to product management. So in a sense, I've been really, really lucky and fortunate that I just kind of stumbled on it.
And then for those that have heard e-commerce, we hear about it when we read it, but can you just give a definition for those who don't know what e-commerce is?
Yeah, and e-commerce could be very broad in this sense as well. So there's e-commerce where you could have a SaaS solution. So you're creating a service for other e-commerce business. You could have the marketplace where you might not actually sell a product, or you might not own a product, but you're selling other people's product. And then there's direct to consumer, where you're the actual brand and you are selling your product. But in most of the sense, customers are able to buy these products online, and they're delivered, or a customer can pick it up in the store. So it's basically like one product, and you're trying to sell to one customer at a time.
So like Amazon and eBay are some examples.
Yeah, and Amazon is probably the best, the one that everyone thinks about. That's a marketplace for everyone. But in a sense, then you have AWS, which is also kind of more of a SaaS as well, but still supports the e-commerce platform.
Oh, very nice. And then I forgot to mention, for those of you who are joining live and you have questions for Zach, please feel free to type in the question in the comments section of the LinkedIn streaming or platform. So that way we can answer your questions. And back to the questions that I have for you, Zach. So can you describe how a traditional product manager differs from an e-commerce product manager?
Yeah, so I'll start with how is it the same? That might help as well. It's a traditional sense where you're working with engineers, UX, your data science, whoever it is, and you're solving a customer problem. And there are different types of product managers within e-commerce as well. There's the technical side of it, where they're more of an enabler for other groups. So marketing, they might be building tools or automation system for marketing. There's enablers for price strategy. for vendor onboarding, customer insights. So it could be, again, very broad, and you could do many things, which is somewhat similar to any kind of other place out there. If you're thinking about like Meta, they have a lot of like the back end, the front end, the user experience, and enablers. What's different for e-commerce, it might be more of like the business sense. So like, where do they make the money? And that is selling that one product to that one customer. And once you achieve that goal, you sell it to the customer, you're starting that cycle all over again, right? So it's not like you have a subscription, and you got that customer and they're there for the next year, for the next month. You're trying to figure out like, how do you get them back, but maybe not selling that same product. Like, what's the next product that they want, or how do you get them to buy that product again, anticipate it. But then also in the retail space, or I guess e-commerce, there's that retail space, that physical store. There's supply chain, which is that physical element as well. And so product managers can also be more focused on like a physical part of it. So helping store associates with the kiosks, or helping with stock. So your interactions might actually be more in the store and interacting with the associate, versus on the technology side of it, or you're still building, but you're not necessarily doing this broad code. You're actually interacting with the stores and the store associate. You're touching things every day.
So you're actually in the business and talking to all these associates to make their jobs easier?
Yeah, so and this is part of what you consider like store technology. So there's store associates, and their job is obviously to help customers stock shelves, make sure that products are there, and obviously there's a more broad sense in the stores as well. But there's still technology. There's a lot of technology in order to build out these experiences in the store. Just like a kiosk. I mean, how customers interact with the kiosk, but also like how do you stock an item, when to stock it, when to refresh it. All that data also lives, and someone's interacting, a product manager's making these decisions. Often it's more of like an enabler. So you're providing a service that builds more insights to help drive some of these stores' decision making.
Oh, very nice. And then, can you describe what your day-to-day function or role would look like?
Yeah, so my role is more focused on like the user experience. So more of like the online, not so much of the store. My day usually, like the morning, I'm very tactical, where I'm making sure that the team has everything. We're doing our stand-ups, make sure I have all the roadblocks. It's around communication. Lowe's is a big company, so it's so important to make sure that we're communicating everything we're doing. We're talking with our business partners, marketing, with our merchants, to make sure that they understand what's happening with the site, what's changes. And then the rest of my day sometimes goes into discovery. So we're running A/B tests. We're pulling data. We're getting insights. We're looking at how customers are interacting. We're seeing user research. All these things we're trying to drive and build out a decision, and thinking about like, what are we doing for our next opportunity, making sure that we're still on that right opportunity as well. Yeah, I think that's, I mean, I feel like that if you ask me that question tomorrow, I have a completely different answer, because it changes every day. And that's probably why I also like e-commerce, where I mean, every day I'm probably doing something different, slightly different. It might still be towards that same purpose of solving that customer problem, trying to figure it out, but it's always different. I'm always learning.
We have a question from an audience member that
Yeah, thanks for the question.
would add would add to this is how do you gather customer feedback for the enhancements you deliver on Lowe's website or any e-commerce website? Any suggested tools that work well?
There's so many tools. So one of the things that we get customer feedbacks through like a feedback loop. So there's on most sites, including Lowe's, there's a little like leave a feedback. You can push that and customers give insight on their problems. We also have interrupters on those sites as well. So as the customers engage and sometimes we'll choose what certain engagement, what their behavior is, and we'll decide to interrupt them and ask questions like, how was that experience that you just went through, or did you see it? What was your thoughts? How can you improve on it? And so we'll take that. It's a small percent of customers that see that interrupter, that provide that. But that small percent gives great insights. So a lot of times we'll digest all that data and start theming them. So we'll look at how customers navigate. Did they talk about certain words, and we theme them, and then find out where the biggest problem is for that as well. We also use a playback tool as well, so we can see their feedback, but then we can also go back and see like what did they actually do, which often is different. So sometimes customers will complain about a specific thing, but when we look at it, their complaint isn't necessarily like valid or not valid, but they mean something else. It's the words that they're using is actually interpreted, is meant to be something else. But the fact that we can actually see what they're doing helps us understand it a little bit better as well. I hope I answered their question with that.
Yeah, and if there's any more questions for that response, please feel free to ask in the comments. Another question is, would you be able to speak to things to keep in mind when building enterprise products as opposed to consumer products?
Enterprise products versus consumer. Yeah, I mean, so obviously the consumer, who you're trying to get to buy is probably like that mindset that you have to have. So enterprise, you're probably trying to get someone to buy this tool. So you got to figure out like what problems that they have. Versus like a consumer, it's more of like you're trying to get them to buy that specific product, and you're narrowing down your scope. Example, one of the things that I always find an issue with like enterprise systems, like the SaaS that help powers e-commerce, is they're very general. So if you think about like how Lowe's and their customer and their product, most enterprise systems, most like SaaS solutions are very broad, and they can focus on multiple products and multiple customers, and so it doesn't necessarily narrow down the scope of that specific person. So when you're building, you have to build very broad so you can get a very big audience. For direct to consumer, you know who your audience is, and you're building for a very specific need.
And what should product managers know or understand about e-commerce to be successful?
Yeah, I love this question. I think you have to be very data focused, and I love to use the term data informed versus data driven. There's so many. If you look at data for e-commerce, it could be very misleading. You have to understand like how the customer uses the site, their research, before you can just make a decision based on the data. Which is why I think understanding behavioral economics is so crucial. Buying is such an emotional process. and the data doesn't show that. User research doesn't also show that as well. It's very hard to get with user research, and then actually in that research get that emotion out of the customer. So understanding behavior economics and what drives that decision. Is it urgency? Is it price? Is it just pure emotion, the want versus need? And then there's curiosity. It goes back into those things I was just talking about, the data and the behavior, as well as understanding, seeing data and question it, or, is it really valid? How do we validate it? And then this might get, I like to throw a little wrench in there, but I think you have to have a backbone and be humble at the same time for e-commerce, and especially in the retail. So besides Amazon, e-commerce and a lot of the retail companies weren't born from product, right? So a lot of people have been in that industry for 15 years, 20 years. And they've been doing what they've been doing, and they've been very successful at it as well. And what often happens is you'll see like this young whippersnapper of a product manager come in and tell them, here, you can improve your process and through AI, and you tend to lose the person, and they're not welcome in it, and so you have to be humble, but you also have to like have that backbone and know like the process and believe in product management, but there's a kind of a give and take in that sense.
Yeah. Are there any resources that you would recommend on either like e-commerce in general or behavior economics?
Yeah, so for research, so I'm a huge fan of looking outside of product management for research or resource as well. So there's like podcasts that the Jason and Scott show. And so they talk about like what's going on in the industry, not from a product sense, but from like a business sense, what they're doing. It talks a lot about like Amazon, but they're talking about like what works, what doesn't, and some of the industry trends as well, which you don't always hear. And then on like LinkedIn, there's Rick Watson as well, who's amazing. He'll take shareholders research, so all the things that CEOs talk about in their to their shareholders, and he simplifies it and talks about like what's really going on. Here's the trends as well. Talks a lot about Shopify and like what they're trying to work towards. So it's always fascinating to see those trends. Behavioral science, that's a great question. I love the book Irrational Rational, or I might switch those out. It's a great book about the behavioral science and some of the decisions. There's a lot of it's research heavy, so it could feel a little dry, but it's very data. It's very interesting, and the studies that they have. I also love Malcolm Gladwell. He's actually what got me into product management, is because of the behavior side of it. So any book that you have that you can read of his is really useful. And but yeah, there's not. I was trying to think of also like who to follow on like LinkedIn. There's not too many people that talk. At least I haven't found it that talk about it as well.
Well, thank you for sharing those resources. Can you give an example of a lesson that you learned that impacted your role as a product manager in e-commerce?
Yeah, so one of the first things that I did as a product manager, I was helping customers. I was trying to get customers to buy sunglasses, and through research, we kept hearing about they wanted some kind of like style guide. They wanted to be asked questions, and then we would recommend products for them, and did a bunch of research for it, and did prototypes, build out the prototypes, got input from customers as well. They all loved it. and went to go and launch it, and it failed. It failed miserably. No one touched it. No one interacted with it. The people that did interacted, they left. And I was like, what's going on? And we tried everything and eventually just gave up. What I learned from that is about user research and how important it is to ask the right questions, but also try to understand, like, the customer has this really fuzzy idea of what would solve their problem. And realistically, what I should have done, it was kept asking them questions. So when they came to me and said I wanted some style guide and asked me questions, I should have kept asking them, like, why do you want this? What would help you? What's some of the barriers from it? And learn a little bit more. And what I would have discovered is a customer needs some of these process end times. They need for them to do research. Part of like what they're doing is going through like the discovery phase of it. And when I tried to take this questionnaire, I shrunk all these questions, all these decisions into one spot. And it actually just overloaded them with questions. I tried to simplify it, but I actually overloaded. And I learned so much from that. One, that customer needs that processing time. They need to do their own research, and not always to shrink everything down, which is often what happens in e-commerce. People take these big, large process. They see customers take many steps, and they'll try to shrink it down, which is not always the right decision.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. The importance of asking why and being curious.
Yes.
What comes to my mind. Another question from the audience member: how do you manage user acquisition and retention?
Yeah, and I don't get into too much of the user acquisition and retention. But obviously for e-commerce, like the big thing that customers bring in, or the thing that brings customers in is around SEO. So there I might actually interact with some of our SEO teams. We have a team that specifically just focus on SEO. And so we'll have interactions with them. We'll make sure that like the things that we build are not affecting, or could also improve it as well. Some examples that I've had in my past when I was working on recommendations, while recommendations isn't necessarily like a CEO driver, having that perfect copy and how we write the copy for some of the titles for the recommendations can really help improve in that SEO and bringing in customers. As far as acquisition then as well, so that's more of like the marketing side of it. Again, there's product managers that focus more on like the technology side of marketing. But I don't get it too much into those. I wish I could answer that question a little bit more. But the SEO is probably the one I could get into the most.
Another question from an audience member. Do you have a vision for the ideal customer experience on web mobile? And how do you push the boundaries there?
And web mobile, I'm assuming that they're talking about like the browse, like on not necessarily an app, but the browse. It's an interesting question. I think you have to understand like how the customer journey starts. And so I'll think of it like through the Lowe's lens. There's a lot of customers that start I'll step back. If a customer is going through and they want to update their kitchen, right? So like what is that journey? So it often starts with not at Lowe's, right? It's actually on Pinterest and it's on Google, where they're just trying to understand trends, and they're trying to understand like what's out there, and what are people looking at, what's popular. And they're just trying to get ideas, and they're not concerned too much about pricing. They're probably just trying to get like an overall budget. They're not thinking about availability, the features, anything like that. So they're really trying to do like this low effort research. Once they got it, then they start going on to Lowe's, and they're starting to actually do their research and looking at products and taking their knowledge from Pinterest and bringing that into Lowe's. And kind of starting that journey there. When you think about it from that perspective, though, a customer they'll go from online, they'll go into in store, they'll go back onto like the desktop. There is no kind of perfect journey, meaning like a customer doesn't always just stay on mobile web and continue to stick there. They're fluent. They're everywhere. And so if I had to think of like this perfect journey, it's really understanding and connecting all those dots and understanding that the customer starts and stops their research. They're looking at product. They come back. They might go into the store. They might talk to an associate, and then they might go back onto online and make that purchase. And so it has to connect. When especially for someone who's doing like that bathroom remodel, that big in it, where they're buying 100 different products, they're constantly going back and forth. And we just have to understand what they have purchased, their preference, where they want to go when they go in the store. The store associate can also gain those preferences, those understanding as well. And just that connection really is probably the ultimate. I didn't answer his question, I know, because it's hard for me to stay in one place, knowing that the customer is not there. Like they're everywhere. They don't care about one place. They want to be agnostic of the device.
Well, it sounds like there is a lot to factor in, and just understanding that as well is part of the what you must do as a product manager, understand all aspects.
Yeah, it's one of the difficult, and going back to like the data part and also the behavior, it's one of the difficulties of e-commerce, right? And we can make a product, and it might help customers in that discovery, that early research. They're not ready to buy, but a lot of our metrics are around conversion, right? A customer gets onto the site, they have to convert. And so we're trying to get them to convert, but they're not ready for that. They just wanted to do research. And so there's sometimes that conflict of we're trying to get that one metric, that conversion, but we also, we want them to do that research. We want them to take that time. And especially we wanted to do it on Lowe's without bugging them. But when they're ready, that's when we want to be ready and sell you. And it's a difficult spot. It's hard to get that. Data's not always connected in that sense as well. Just technology wise, it's hard. So it's interesting. Which is probably why I love e-commerce, because it's that problem that there's solutions out there, but it hasn't fully been solved.
Yeah, and then we only have a few minutes left, and I want to end with a question that would help product managers, or those who want to transition into product management, those who want to be in e-commerce. And you kind of went over some of the characteristics of e-commerce and why you love it so much is because of the variety, the problems that you solve are, not your typical ones. But what advice would you give somebody who wants to either go into product management or go into product management and be in e-commerce? Yeah, so
one, you should get into e-commerce. I love it. It's not going away. It's growing. Everyone, it's new. If you want to get into product management, and especially in e-commerce, and I'll say easy path, like your easiest path. Like let's say you're an engineer, and you want to get into e-commerce as a product management. Start working at an e-commerce company as an engineer. In your product management and e-commerce, like there's such a need for it. And like just Lowe's is hiring like crazy for, even in this economy, still hiring a lot of product managers, and we're trying to get them in. And people tend to not think about e-commerce when they're thinking about product management as well. And so there's definitely that need. And so if you already have this skill and you're like, yes, I want to get into e-commerce, take that skill and start working at an e-commerce industry. And then once you're there, start talking to product managers in there and say, hey, I want to get into this. What do I do? And I promise you, they're like, haha, sweet, yes. I'll like, come on, let's do this. Let's get on board, right? And they'll bring you on, and they need help as well. As far as like the traditional side, it's the same thing like any other product manager is going to give you. It's all about like building out those skills. You could build out e-commerce sites right now. You could sell. You don't have to sell your product. You can sell other people's product. Just learn, right, and build that skill for it, and just start getting familiar with like the entire process of e-commerce. That would help you as well if you can't get into an e-commerce company.
Thank you so much. I think I'm just so excited about e-commerce and doing the research just from hearing your experiences with it. And so I thank you so much for sharing your journey, your experience, and your enthusiasm about the role.
Yeah, thanks so much. And if anyone's watching too and they have more questions, please feel free to, on LinkedIn to message me and ask. I'm happy to answer, especially e-commerce. I'll answer those questions.
Thank you so much, Zach, for your time and answering our questions. And thank you, audience members, for those of you who are joining us live or joining us later. Thanks so much.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much.